Happy New Year from This Week in Enterprise Tech. We have Mr. Curtis Franklin and Mr. Brian Chee here today. We talk about an invisible product that has revolutionized the industry. You shouldn't miss that. Plus, there are several big cybersecurity events that happened over the last month, and they continue to evolve. We're going to talk about all of them. Plus, we have a great guest to reign in the new year, Bobby Calderwood of Evident Systems. He captivates us with event-driven systems and architectures. You shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 425, recorded January 8th, 2021. What is event-driven modeling? This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Nareva. Getting your audio ready for meetings back in the office? Nareva Audio is designed for distancing. It automatically adapts to new room configurations so you're ready for the new normal and whatever comes next. Learn more at nareva.com/twit. And by IT Pro TV. Now you can look forward to a successful new year where you can get a new career in IT with the best IT education around. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription. Use code Enterprise30 at checkout. And by Axonius. Time is the enemy of security, and that's where Axonius comes in. Axonius helps organizations immediately know what assets they have and shows which devices, cloud instances, and users adhere to or deviate from security policies. Learn more and try it free at axonius.com/enterprise. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. Happy New Year to you all. I am Louis Maresca, your host and your guide to the big world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the A-team, the experts, and my friends, starting with Mr. Brian Chee. He's the net architect at Sky Fiber and also the geek in paradise, at least for the current period. Cheebert, Happy New Year, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. And I'm sitting in a nearly empty house. Most of my household goods are on their way to Orlando, Florida. We hopefully will have the appraisal back any day now and get this house on the market and sold, and we can get on with the next big adventure. But anyway, I'm really happy to be here. It's a brand new year. Hopefully things will go better, and hopefully we don't have armed insurrection in the studio.
Now, were you able to do any celebrating? I know that your house is empty there. Any celebrating for the new year? Any parties, anything like that?
Not really, but considering aerial fireworks are legal in Hawaii, the video that some of our friends have been posting from midnight were unbelievable. It's skyrockets going up everywhere, covering almost the entire island. Wow. I've never seen that many fireworks all in one place ever before.
Be cool to get a drone view of that. That'd be awesome.
I actually retweeted that on Twitter, both Twitter and Facebook.
Oh, cool.
I will try and find it and send you the link.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of celebrating, we also have Mr. Curtis Franklin. Now, Curtis, you have a change in your professional life. Happy New Year. What's going on?
Well, the happiest of New Year's to you. Yeah, a little bit of a change. I have a new job. I have left dark reading and have become a senior analyst at Omdia. I'm in the cybersecurity practice. My main work is going to be on enterprise security management and SecOps. The good news is that Omdia is a sister company to Dark Reading and Black Hat and the rest of the Informa technology group. So don't have to learn new people, don't have to meet a new work family, just doing some new stuff and really looking forward to doing more analysis and a little bit less daily news reporting.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations, and we look forward to seeing what comes out of that. Well, the new year has definitely presented us with nothing short of some amazing stories in enterprise. So we're going to definitely jump into the mix here. We're going to talk a little about how, in the first bite, how there's an invisible product out there that really has revolutionized the industry. So you should stick to that. We'll get to that soon. Plus, there's several big cybersecurity events that have happened over the last month, and they continue to evolve over time. We can get more information about them. So we're going to talk about them here as well. Plus, we have a great guest to reign in the new year. He captivates me when he talks about event-driven systems and event models and architectures. We have Bobby Calderwood of Evident Systems to discuss some of the new advancements in the area of event-driven modeling and systems. But before we get to all that goodness, we do have to talk about this week's news blips as well. So let's go ahead and jump into those. Now, what better way to start a new year but to talk about how bright and fast the future is with upcoming internet providers? Wouldn't you agree? Well, we've talked about this plenty on TWiT in the past. SpaceX's Starlink satellite broadband service promises to deliver better, faster broadband to those who just out of reach of cable, fiber, or DSL. But while early speed tests show the service could prove hugely beneficial for rural Americans without other options, experts say it won't quite be as disruptive to the broken U.S. broadband market as you might think. Wah, wah. Now, Starlink relies on lower orbit satellite constellations capable of providing faster speeds at lower latency than the dumpster fire that's the traditional satellite broadband. Now, Chee knows what I'm talking about here. Now, traditional satellite is laggy, slow, expensive, and usage capped. Starlink and other similar efforts by companies like Amazon promise faster, lower latency broadband almost anywhere in the continental U.S. Now, early speed test results linked to Starlink IP addresses are pretty promising. Now, speed tests from those participating in Starlink beta show peak download speeds of upwards of 114 megabits per second, with upload speeds topping out at about 40 megabits per second. Now, that's notably faster than many DSL lines that are out there today and on par with many mid-tier cable broadband offerings. Now, average speeds are notably faster, but still a big improvement notably slower, but still a big improvement for rural Americans struggling with traditional satellite or DSL lines that haven't been upgraded in many years. Now, Starlink will be particularly welcome news to the 42 million Americans currently out of the range of broadband that I have today, and a problem that's been highlighted by the pandemic lockdowns. In fact, even forcing kids to huddle in the dirt outside of Taco Bell just to be online. But while Starlink will certainly help bridge this digital divide by bringing better options to rural Americans, Elon Musk has acknowledged that the service won't have the capacity to seriously disrupt regional U.S. telecom monopolies like AT&T, Verizon, Spectrum, and Comcast. Now, Starlink comes with the other costs as well, namely the severe impacts that scientists say and astronomers say about low orbit satellite constellations will have on scientific research and the night sky. What I do think here is this technology is a good push to implement and deploy and get adopters of it, and it will get telecom companies actually thinking about what's next. If nothing else, they'll have to compare themselves with the average speed packages from a satellite internet service. I, for one, hope this is just the beginning to a leap forward in the fight for faster and affordable internet speeds.
Well, just as though they couldn't stand anymore, we find out that health care organizations are bearing the brunt of cyber attacks during the pandemic. According to a new report this week from Checkpoint Software, attacks on healthcare entities worldwide jumped 45% in the past 2 months as attackers tried to take advantage of the pandemic by disrupting operations and extorting ransoms from organizations under tremendous pressure to provide uninterrupted services. According to Checkpoint, the increase in attacks was, in fact, double the increase in cyber attacks on all other industries. On average, healthcare organizations experienced 626 attacks per week in November, compared with 430 attacks on average in the previous months. The most common attack vectors were ransomware, DDoS, botnets, and remote code execution attacks. This increase is borne out in reporting from other companies. According to Mimecast, for instance, 90% of healthcare organizations experienced email-borne attacks, the most common vector for phishing scams, during the last year. This activity was especially heavy during the first 100 days of the COVID-19 outbreak, causing significant downtime for almost 3/4 of impacted organizations. Zscaler, meanwhile, counted a staggering 1.6 billion, that's with a B, SSL-based attacks that targeted organizations in the healthcare sector between January and September of last year. Another major attack trend for the healthcare sector, a significant increase in the use of cloud storage service providers like AWS, Google, Azure, and Dropbox to host the malicious content attackers are using in their campaigns.
So this story is about batteries. A new battery chemistry results in first rechargeable zinc-air battery. And the story goes on like this. Most of the disposable batteries you'll come across are technically termed alkaline batteries. They work at a high pH and typically use zinc as the charge carrier. Zinc is great because it's really cheap, can be used to make one of the two electrodes, and in the right context allows the use of air as the other electrode. These latter two items simplify the battery, allowing it to be more compact and lighter weight. So far, attempts to do similar things with the lithium batteries have come up short. The problem with all this is that the batteries are disposable for good reason. The chemistry of discharging doesn't really allow things to work in reverse. Carbon dioxide from the air reacts with the electrolyte, forming carbonates that block one electrode, and the zinc doesn't redeposit neatly on the electrode it came from, instead creating spiky structures called dendrites that can short out the battery. Now, an international team has figured out how to make zinc-air batteries rechargeable. Their answer, it seems, involves getting rid of the alkaline electrolyte and that gave the batteries their name. Okay, so I'm going to stay away from talking too much about electrochemistry. There's entire conferences on that. But the story does go on to explain that this isn't going to be a magic bullet for cheap, fast, rechargeable, high-capacity batteries yet, but rather a new path to follow for various types of metals to use in battery chemistry. Whatever happens, lithium is too expensive and too reactive for the long term, and electrochemists are continuing their search for the holy grail of battery chemistry.
Now, container technology and Docker usage is continuing to trend. I, for one, am a huge advocate of microservice architectures that go along with containers. Unfortunately, with the popularity of any technology comes additional focus from the other side of the coin, the hackers. Now, analysts from security firm Trend Micro said in a report this week that they've spotted a malware botnet that collects and steals Docker and AWS credentials. Now, researchers have linked the botnet to a cybercrime operation known as Team TNT, a group first spotted over the 2020 summer installing crypto mining malware on misconfigured container platforms. Now, initial reports at the time said that Team TNT was breaching container platforms by looking for Docker systems that were exposing their management API port online without a password. Now, researchers said that Team TNT group would access exposed Docker containers. Then they would install crypto mining malware. The malware then would steal credentials for Amazon Web Services servers to pivot to a company's other IT systems to infect even more servers and deploy more crypto miners. Now, at the time, researchers said that Team TNT was the first crypto mining botnet that implemented a feature dedicated to collecting and stealing AWS credentials. Now, the interesting thing about the malware and the code behind it is it's actually elegantly written with comments and everything. It actually has examples. Now, they even developed a feature to, quote, collect Docker API credentials on top of the AWS cred stealing code. So they're even building on top of their infrastructure there. Now, it just goes to show you your technology has made it when the hackers start writing clear, concise, and effective code to breach it.
Well, over the years here on TWiT, we've talked about breaches caused by misconfigured S3 buckets, misconfigured Azure rules, and badly written application code. This week, Nissan North America source code was leaked online due to misconfiguration of a company Git server, which was left exposed online with the default username and password of, wait for it, admin. The repository reportedly contained Nissan North America mobile apps, parts of the Nissan Assist diagnostic tool, Nissan's internal core mobile library, dealer business systems and dealer portal, client acquisition and retention tools, market research tools and data, vehicle logistics portal, vehicle connected services, and various other backends and internal tools. Nissan has confirmed the incident, stating that it is, quote, aware of a claim regarding a reported improper disclosure of Nissan's confidential information in source code, end quote. The company has reportedly launched an investigation, but it's worth noting that information in source code is confidential only to the extent that you don't show it to the rest of the world.
Well, the day after Red Hat's announcement about CentOS changing, CentOS Stream, CentOS co-founder Gary Kurtzer, now the CEO of high-performance computing startup Control IQ, said he was, quote, was just as shocked as the rest of the community with the news, unquote, and announced that he was starting a project to fork CentOS. Quote, in response to this unexpected shift, I am proud to announce the launch of a new project, Rocky Linux, in honor of my late CentOS co-founder, Rocky McGraw, unquote. So that press statement was spawned because CentOS was one of those Linux distributions that was nice and stable, and it was kind of the last step. You prototype in it. A lot of organizations can't afford Red Hat Enterprise Linux would use that. Well, when it changed to CentOS Stream, where it would be revved very, very quickly. In fact, just a little bit less than Fedora, which changes almost daily. The CentOS Stream pissed off an awful lot of people. University of Hawaii SOST, School of Ocean Earth Science and Technology, was actually CentOS primary. But anyway, going on with the story, they're even more promising than Rocky Linux. There's another project codenamed Lenix, L-E-N-I-X. And it was announced by Cloud Linux, a Palo Alto-based company that has also been developing and marketing a lightweight and hardened Red Hat Enterprise Linux / CentOS clone to meet the needs of shared hosting providers since 2010. And the cool thing is they're actually talking about having a way of migrating to Linux in place, which is very cool. So my opinion is that Red Hat is positioning itself to kill a golden goose, since CentOS has long been seen as a roadway to full Red Hat Enterprise Linux adoption once a project matures into money-making territory. Now only time will tell if Red Hat plays the mea culpa card and goes back to the old model or loses a potential upgrade path.
Now, you're probably thinking the best way to protect against account takeover is a physical two-factor auth key, right? Well, the broad consensus among security experts that those physical auth keys provide the most effective protection against account takeovers. When claims like these float around the internet, someone will try and beat them with any technology. Now, research published this week doesn't change that, but it does show how malicious attackers with physical possession of a Google Titan key can actually clone it. Now, there's some steep hurdles for an attack to be successful here in this case, but a hacker would first have to steal a target's account password, gain covert possession of the physical key for as many as 10 hours, and the cloning also requires up to $12,000 worth of equipment, custom software, and advanced electrical engineering and cryptographic backgrounds. Now, you have to have the resources to do it. That means the key cloning of it in the wild would likely be done only by a nation state pursuing its highest value targets. Nevertheless, this work actually shows that Google Titan security key or other impacted products would not avoid an unnoticed security breach by attackers willing to put in the effort to do it. What can be done to protect yourself here? Well, you probably could switch over to the FIDO UTF or U2F hardware security keys where there's no vulnerability that has yet to be discovered. Keyword yet. Like with any technology, it's only as secure as a hacker's intention to actually hack on it. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get to the bites, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Nareva. As we think about heading back to the office, things are going to be different. We're going to be met with some changes. Social distancing is hard and will continue to be a thing for a while. It really can impact meetings and meeting room audio. This means you're going to have to move things around sometimes and change configurations. You're going to need to still consider remote workers and ensure they have great sound. And that means you really need to have great mic coverage. But most conventional audio systems today do not offer the flexibility you need to easily accommodate those changes. Now, technologies like Beamforming systems will need to be adjusted, usually by expensive technicians, and tabletop systems may require additional mics. You may need to have to sanitize those mics between meetings as well. Plus, it's not just the technology you have to worry about. People in the meeting have to change their behaviors too. You have to leave room between people. You have to have assigned spots to ensure they're facing the right directions. What if there was a better way to get clear, reliable audio and just let your team act naturally and still feel safe at the same time? Nareva Audio is designed for distancing. One analyst actually called Nareva Audio the first socially distancing mic system. Nareva uses a completely original approach to audio conferencing called microphone mist technology. I've witnessed this technology. It's super cool. It fills a room with thousands of virtual microphones. You get true full room coverage so people can be heard from anywhere in the room, no matter where they sit or face and how they're distanced. You don't need to bring in technicians with Nareva Audio. You can install each microphone and speaker bar on the wall by yourself. Plus, Nareva Audio automatically adapts to any room configuration. This is so revolutionary. Microphone mist technology has 4 patents around this technology. Now, Nareva Audio products have won numerous awards, including the top new technology award at ISE 2020 for the Nareva HDL 200 system. No matter the size of your room, they have full line of systems for small, medium, and large spaces. Now, HubSpot is a happy customer. Jimmy Yan, their principal collaboration engineer, says, "We were so impressed with the sound quality and ease of install and ease of use of the HDL 300. It was a no-brainer for us to adopt it." To learn more about how Nareva Audio is the simple and cost-effective way to let your teams distance in meetings and still act and converse naturally, visit nareva.com/twit. That's NUREVA.com/twit. And we thank Nareva for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now for our first bite of 2021. Now, it's an interesting story that continues to scale out the product about a product that continues to scale out the industry and help organizations thrive, and scale their business. Now, what is it? Well, it's actually dry ice. That's right. Dry ice was used actually in several gifts I was given over the holidays, including someone actually shipped me Jenny's ice cream from Columbus, Ohio. That's right. They shipped ice cream, which, by the way, was some of the best I tasted. And it came still frozen and ready to eat here in Seattle. Now, dry ice has allowed companies like Jenny's to thrive and be able to ship much farther distances and scale their business out. But what about the medical industry? Now, we're hearing about the numerous vaccines that are coming out around the world for COVID-19. Now, some of them require sub-zero temperatures to actually survive transportation and storage. Now, the Pfizer and BioNTech one is so delicate that it must be at negative 70 degrees Celsius, which is actually negative 94 Fahrenheit. And that's not just colder than most freezers. It's actually colder than winter in the South Pole. Think about that. Now, holding the temperature is not a problem for dry ice, which is actually a solid at negative 78 degrees Celsius, negative 109 Fahrenheit. In fact, for shipping Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine, nothing else is more practical than dry ice. So there you go. The nation's dry ice makers aim to be ready for all this. They're getting bombarded with inquiries about hospital districts and public health departments. Airgas is one of the nation's largest dry ice companies with 15 manufacturing sites and 16 distribution centers. It's collaborating with the federal government to actually around vaccine logistics efforts for that Operation Warp Speed. Now, dry ice has long been an indispensable and mostly invisible ingredient in the economy. Farmers actually clean out their wells with it. Cities blast graffiti off the walls and statues with it. The nation's largest meat companies mix it right into their products as they grind them to keep the temperature safe and actually prevent the fat from gumming up their grinding equipment. Factories all kinds, for those that make shoes to those that make frozen waffles, have installed jets of dry ice pellets right on the manufacturing line to clean molds in the real time. Now, dry ice even helped remove radioactive debris from helicopters that were used during Japan's nuclear disaster in 2011. Now, dry ice is made by taking purified CO2 gas, chilling it, and pressurizing it to the point that it's liquefied, then releasing the pressure, which causes the liquid CO2 to take on a snowflake-like consistency. It's then turned into blocks or into pellets that look like foam shipping peanuts. Now, if you think about that for a second, it's a pretty amazing technology, pretty elegant. I pretty much love material science. Now, it's a pretty cool product. It's a visible product in the industry, but it's really starting to come back into the forefront because of a lot of things that are happening. I want to bring the co-host back in here. Cheebert, we know that dry ice can really revolutionize the shipment of the new vaccines. Now, people were worried about that, how viable it is to transport those things because of the need for such low temperatures. But it still I still think about it, once they are transported and they get to the hospitals, they can't use dry ice anymore, right? They need to do something else.
Yeah, and dry ice, unfortunately, starts getting really expensive really, really fast, mostly because of how painful it is to ship. Negative 80 freezers, which can be cranked back to negative 70, are actually really, really expensive. The University of Hawaii has a program going. We're trying to get people off the old, ancient negative 80 freezers because they use up a ton of electricity. In fact, when we started measuring them so we could get energy rebates, they would use in excess of what a typical household would use per month on a weekly basis. That's how much energy they need. The new freezers, which actually instead of using a Freon-like substance, is actually moving to propane at much, much, much higher vacuums. So they can cut the electrical use in half. Well, that's one downside. The other downside is if you're using up that much energy, you're also producing that much heat. So it has direct ramifications for HVAC companies, especially since a lot of HVAC systems are delicately balanced. So that means a lot of work to rebalance and get rid of that extra heat. Now, the other problem is when you start shipping around large batches of dry ice, you start flooding areas with carbon dioxide, very cold carbon dioxide that goes to the lowest point. So one of the things that some of the hospitals have had to be very careful of is to make sure they unpack it in areas that are well ventilated so that the cold carbon dioxide doesn't go down stairwells and so forth and potentially cause people to start suffocating because they can't get oxygen. There's a lot of really, really interesting ramifications when you start dealing with this much dry ice and having to deal with it. So, folks, the pandemic is forcing us to change the way we move around and do things. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when we start shipping a lot of this vaccine around so we can cover the entire nation.
Yeah, I was gonna throw it to Curtis to ask that. I think, obviously dry ice has been around for a while, but we're starting to see a comeback, and obviously we're hearing a lot of the ramp up. Curtis, what do you think? Is the vaccine just, basically bringing back this industry and making businesses look at it more about dry ice for shipping things and keeping things cold?
Well, I think that dry ice is one of those things that is required for this new, very special situation. We have a lot of situations that arise that call for a particular, we'll call it unusual ingredient. This is the precise reason why the United States had strategic helium reserves to prepare for the event of us needing to put lots of blimps in the air. So I think what this has done is call out the fact that we have a supply chain in many industries that is sized pretty well for normal requirements, but not for surges. We have seen this kind of thing before when we were looking for a sudden increase in the supply of, for example, hand sanitizer in March of 2020. Surely everyone recalls the great hand sanitizer shortages of March and April, when we found out that we could make lots of this, but the whole process of making it, transporting it, packaging it, getting it into the hands of consumers involved a lot of steps, and there were bottlenecks. Same is true with dry ice. The manufacturers know about how much is needed. They can produce that. plus a bit more. But when all of a sudden we need tons upon tons upon tons of additional dry ice, we start seeing the limits of the kind of planning that we've gotten so good at through all of our various enterprise resource planning systems and methodologies.
Right. Well, even though it wasn't a truly enterprise store, we definitely thought that this product kind of behind the scenes impacts the enterprise in a big way, and will definitely impact how things go forward as well. Well, folks, that does it for that bite. Let's go jump into the next bite. Now, there have been several big cybersecurity events that have happened over the last month, and they continue to evolve and get more and deeper information about them. Curtis, you want to tell us about one?
Sure. Now, this is yet another chapter in the ongoing story of SolarWinds. You all remember SolarWinds. That's the enterprise and network management software that pretty much no one outside of large enterprises had heard of 2 months ago, but now everyone knows about. Why? Because it was hacked. And we're finding out that it wasn't so much, perhaps, that SolarWinds was hacked, but one of their supply chain items was hacked. This story is complicated. It is long. It is wide-reaching, and it's not nearly over. But here's a new piece of it. It turns out that one of the customers of SolarWinds was Microsoft. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise. Last time we heard 495 of the Fortune 500 were customers. So this is not saying that Microsoft was in any way wrong for being a customer. But through the account takeover aspect of this, and believe me, we're going to be talking about this account takeover a lot more. I was on a call with Department of Homeland Security earlier this week where they were talking a great deal about this complete account takeover, which means that it's an account takeover that is complete to the point that it is transparent to the management of the network. So one of these accounts that was taken over, as it turns out, had the ability to look at some Windows source code. Did not have the ability to make changes, so it could not, for example, install backdoors, but it could review the code and look carefully at it. Now, Microsoft now is aware of this. Microsoft as a company has said that viewing the source code poses no increase in security risk because its security threat models assumes attackers have some knowledge of the code. We're going to get back to that in a moment. Now, the company says that the account takeover has been remediated and that no customer data was at any time put at jeopardy. So let's take a moment to think about this. And Brian, I'm going to get your take on this first. Lou, I know you're in something of a sensitive position here, so I'm going to be careful with you. But Brian, I want to ask you, how much additional risk is there if someone can look at the code they might try to attack? Is that a significant benefit to an attacker?
Now, I put it this way. It's kind of like if you're trying to break through a bank vault. If you have the design documents on how it was put together, that's a big shortcut. So there's some risk. It's not like they're handing you the combination to the bank vault or the keys or anything like that. But when you understand the system you're trying to break into, you've got a better chance of actually succeeding. And so that's one of the big reasons why a lot of high security installations are physically air gapped, and we have this thing in the Department of Defense, or actually any military, we have a thing called capabilities and capacities. Just stating an official, say, top speed of a nuclear submarine or things like that. When you start revealing details, you start providing shortcuts to a lot of people if they want to do you harm. So that's one of the things. One of the soapboxes that I've had is there are not a whole heck of a lot of network monitoring and network management tools out there. It's a very small market, and it goes from real cheap or free, takes a big jump, and that's when we start getting into where SolarWinds lives. And then we take another ginormous jump, and we start talking about carrier class management systems like Science Logic's EM7. It seems to me that there is a need for some room, some diversification in the industry that hasn't been happening. And I keep wondering, in fact, the other week, the last episode, we were talking to a venture capitalist, and he and I both kind of had the, I wonder why there isn't more competition, and maybe there needs to be. Anyway, it's basically a roadmap. If you know which way the road's going to be going, then you've got a better chance. So that's actually the direct answer to this question that you posed to me.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, Lou, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm not going to ask you about Microsoft code at all. I'm going to ask you about open source code. You have looked, because you're a professional software developer, you're aware of all the open source projects out there. And as a general rule, we know that there are people who claim that open source software is a greater security risk, although a lot of that has to do with the quality and testing of the code rather than its visibility. But let me ask this question for open source code. How much of its perceived vulnerability do you think comes from the fact that anyone can look at the code? Is that something that plays a role in its vulnerability, or is it more a programming practices thing, and the ability to look at the source code is a minor issue when it comes to open source vulnerability, or not?
I think when it comes to a hacker, most of the time, they're going to attempt to trial and error a system and code the same way. And when you have open source, you can see the source code. It makes it a little easier to determine different areas of the code that are vulnerable. Like, for instance, if you're not sanitizing inputs, or if you are, using things relentlessly without checking them and validating them, that kind of thing. So I think it does make them a little bit more open to things. But again, the one thing with open source is it's so fast to recover and find these things and fix them. I think one of the biggest vulnerabilities is people who just consume them without looking through them and validating the validity of the code. Like, example, if I go and use an NPM package today that's just pure JavaScript, and I've trusted it for years, like something like, I don't know, React or jQuery or something like that in the industry, and somebody has compromised the latest package, they've added their, some of their own code in there. Most CI loops will go and consume these things and then try to run a bunch of tests and roll them out to the wild again with the latest and greatest package update, because they want to get security fixes and all that stuff. And the problem with that is that when you blindly do these things, you open yourself up to vulnerabilities. And I think, organizations have to do a much better job of validating what comes in, the changes that are coming in, why they've been changed, whether they need those changes or not, and not just blindly checking them in or taking them, that kind of thing. So when it comes to open source, there's different levels and layers of vulnerability. And I think all of them come with just, as an organization, knowing that you're using open source and that you need to validate what's coming in. So when you use it for the first time, you got to validate it. And when you consume it for the nth time, you have to validate it. And so I think that's where this comes from. And, and again, does it make it easier? It does. But again, you use it with caution, then there should be less risk.
You hit on a point that I think is going to be critical, and one of the big lessons coming out of SolarWinds. If you look at things like the FAIR model of establishing risk, You have basically it's a complex way of looking at the likelihood that something will go wrong and weighing that in addition to the consequences of that thing going wrong and coming up with an ultimate risk. Many companies assign far too low a score to the likelihood of third-party risk events happening when it came to a trusted partner like SolarWinds. I think this is going to cause a lot of companies to reevaluate those third-party risks. That's good. And when it's put into practice by, as Lou pointed out, validating the quality and security of code at multiple steps along the chain, that's even better. This is not by far the last we're going to hear about SolarWinds. Trust me when I say there are other shoes to drop here. But it's all we need to talk about today because we have a great guest who's going to take us in some directions, well, we haven't gone in a long time here on TWiT. Before we get there, though, we have to talk about a sponsor. And Lou, I think you've got that all queued up and ready to go.
Thank you, Curtis. That's right. Before we get to our great guest, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is IT Pro TV. Now, it's a new year full of amazing opportunities, and IT Pro TV is definitely one of them. Now, IT Pro TV has exactly what you need to get started on the right foot in your IT education. Now, you can get professional and entertaining IT training from the comfort and safety of your own home. Now, January is getting started in IT month at IT Pro TV, and it's a great time to start a new career in the IT industry, which continues to grow even during a pandemic. Now, this month, you can catch 2 webinars for budding IT pros, a free training weekend with 5 courses available at no charge, plus tons of videos on their YouTube channel about starting a new career. Now, with plans for business that your IT team will actually use, or a personal plan that will help you accelerate IT career, IT Pro TV is your one-stop shop here. Now, getting training in Microsoft, Cisco, Apple, Linux, and more, you'll be able to earn IT certifications while improving your IT skills all at the same time. Now, they have over 5,800 hours of IT training and are also the official video training partner of CompTIA. Now, if you're worried about staying on track, don't you worry. You can get one of the learning coaches along with all the wonderful job resources to help you guide you through your career path. You'll always be supported by IT Pro TV's amazing team. Now, for more insight about IT, you can also check out their podcast, TACnado, with Don Puzzett. He's actually featuring industry guests and IT news recaps for a deeper dive into the IT realm. Now, you can look forward to a successful new year where you can get a new career in IT with the best IT education around. Go to itpro.tv/enterprise and use code ENTERPRISE30 to receive 30% off all consumer subscriptions. That's itpro.tv/enterprise and use code ENTERPRISE30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. And we thank itpro.tv for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the guest, my favorite part of the show, where we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT, right? Today we have founder of Evident Systems, Mr. Bobby Calderwood. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Hi, Lou. Thank you.
Now, first and foremost, we have a fantastic topic to talk about here, one near to dear to my heart, but our audience loves to hear people's origin stories. Can you maybe take us through a short journey through tech and what brought you to developing Evident Systems and all of the systems that go along with it?
My education, I got a degree in software, or not in software, in engineering and economics from Dartmouth College. So I've always been really interested in the interplay between technology and business and how they sort of play off of each other. A couple of your segments early on were interesting to me because of that sort of interplay between technology and business. Went on, took a job at a startup early on, was a software engineer there, and was sort of self-taught at the beginning of my career. Again, I got a degree in engineering, not in software. So I was teaching myself along the way, did some federal consulting, some technology consulting for the federal government. And then I landed at a great company called Cognitect. It was called Relevance at the time. Now it's called Cognitect. And they do, they build and steward the Clojure programming language. Rich Hickey, the creator of Clojure, is the CTO there. Worked with Rich and Stu on their database Datomic, which had a lot of these really great principles about event-driven systems and event-sourced systems. Went on to some other startups and things, and then landed at Capital One, where I was a distinguished engineer on their technology fellows team. And we were solving some of the hardest problems at Capital One in terms of banking. And this is where I really started to think and design and envision all systems as event-driven systems, right? We had to sort of unify our view of our customer, see all the different activity that were happening across all these different channels, right? Retail bank and credit cards and mortgage and auto loans and all these things. And with all these things happening, how do we understand the customer's journey? How do we sort of unify across channels how we can help our customers sort of view their financial life, right? So did a lot of design there, implemented some really great systems. I'm proud of a lot of the work we did, and worked on a great team at Capital One. And then about 3 years ago, at the beginning of February, so coming right up on our 3rd anniversary, I left Capital One and started my own company, Evident Systems. We started out doing some great professional services for some really interesting enterprise customers, helping them design and implement event-driven systems. How do we learn to think in terms of events? Software engineers are so used to thinking about the database, right? What's the current state of the world? But that's really sort of a foreign way of thinking about information, right? Historically, in human history, we think about narratives. We think about, causality, and this happened before this, and this caused this, and therefore this other thing happened, right? So we think in terms of events and causality, but software engineers, we've sort of been trained to systematically break our brains to think in terms of the ERD, or the database and the current state of the world, and how do we destructively mutate the current state of the world, right?
Right.
So it was a challenge, right? And a lot of our customers came to us, with less of a technology question and more of like a philosophy and communications and how do we think about event-driven systems? How do we describe them to one another? We have great tools for thinking about database-centric systems, but how do we think about and envision event-driven systems? So we had a couple of really great customers, a huge tax preparation service here in the U.S., a major auto manufacturer with operations all over, but we were working with their European division, healthcare and pharmaceuticals research group that designs new drugs through big data. Who else? We've had some really, really great customers that we've worked with, and all along the way we were kind of teaching them how to use and think about event-driven systems. So that was our professional services work. In addition to that, we were also building products on the side. We're one of those startups that's trying to do both. The first product that we built, coming from the banking world and a banking background, was a product to help banks implement the new real-time payment system. So in the U.S., there's this new real-time payments system that's created by the Clearinghouse, which is kind of a consortium of the biggest banks. And we're like way behind Europe and Asia and South America. They all have had real-time payments for a really long time, and it's old hat. But for us in the U.S., we have this really fractious banking environment where we have like thousands and thousands of banks. So we're a little slower to adjust to these kinds of things. So this new real-time payment system, think kind of ACH or like direct deposit of your paycheck or direct debit of your rent or your mortgage or whatever. It's like that. So it's not credit cards. It's not some of these other payment rails that
I was going to say, how does it relate to Stripe? But it doesn't seem like it's the same.
No, and this would certainly be something that Stripe will probably implement as one of their payment options in the future. But but this is like at the bank level. This is like how money moves between bank accounts, like DDA accounts, your checking account, your savings account and stuff. And if you've ever felt this pain, I know I have, moving money from like your savings account at your bank to like your brokerage account so you can trade stocks or whatever, or
wire transfer, EFT.
Wire transfer. Yeah. So all these things are painful, right? And when I bought a house just recently, it was like, okay, we're going to wire the money, but boy, you better call in a couple of days just to make sure the wire went through and that the accounts are empty. And it's like, well, why do I have to do that? It's 2020. Like, why do I have to do that? So anyway, the real-time payment solves that problem. It's hard for banks to implement, so we built sort of a connection to help, move to real time. So all these batch payment systems, wires, ACH, all these things are sort of batch oriented. You build up this little batch of work, and then at night when the bank's closed, you kind of send the money to all the different banks that you need to send it to. This is a real-time system. It's a real-time payment system, so it's a lot different, and banks weren't used to it. We had expertise in the space from a technology perspective, so we were helping them kind of, be on 24/7, 365, like having uptime, having redundant failover data centers, to have the connection into the network, all that stuff. So we were helping them with that. We were writing the software to react to these messages and things. So over the course of our professional services work and building this kind of real-time payments product, we built sort of a suite of design tools and design methods that we were using with our clients, we were using internally on our own products, and that became ONote. So we sort of developed this methodology and tool set for building event-driven, or designing and building event-driven systems. And that's kind of what became ONote.
We definitely should get in. I want to get into that because there's so much in the event-driven we're going to talk about. I know talk more about Kafka and all the technologies. In fact, I want to bring my co-host back in a minute. But before we get to all that, I do want to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Axonius. You're constantly looking for cybersecurity tool managers. Well, Axonius is the cybersecurity tool manager you've been looking for. It's simple, powerful, and comprehensive. It allows you to centralize your management to automatically validate security policies, remediate gaps as they're discovered, and get the most out of your current security tools. Now, Axonius believes the number one enemy of security and IT teams is time. According to the analyst firm ESG, organizations use 108 separate security tools on average. Now, this equates to 89 hours of labor. That's 19 times a year just to get IT asset inventory. And Axonius takes a radically simple approach to what they call cybersecurity asset management by connecting to the security and management tools that organizations are already using. They have 293 different adapters already available, but if you have one that's not on their list, they can customize it to fit yours. Now, Axonius product collects and correlates information about devices, cloud instances, and users, and gives customers three things: a comprehensive, always up-to-date asset inventory of laptops, desktops, servers, cloud instances, VMs, mobile devices, IoT devices, or anything else you need it for. Now, the ability to ask for questions across all data sources. For example, you can ask if any Windows devices is missing an endpoint agent, or if any cloud instance is not being scanned by a VA scanner, or also you can find out devices with vulnerabilities and users with incorrect permissions. Axonius allows for custom automated enforcement actions. You get to decide what actions to trigger based on any query, including alerts, creating tickets, enriching data, and much more. Take Cimpress, for example. Daniel Fabo took over as their manager of security engineering and was faced with the challenge of managing and securing assets for 11 businesses with their own set of systems and tools. Now, he said that Axonius helped automate a lot of the asset discovery and collection and inventorying by being able to automatically go out and have a touch point with all the different critical infrastructure pieces and correlating it into one clean inventory. Axonius reduces the time it takes to find assets information from 30 to 60 minutes to under 30 seconds, helping security operations and incident response teams to get the context they need for investigations, vulnerability management, and compliance. Now, one senior manager for information security in the finance industry says Axonius has met and exceeded expectations. This has given our organization near real-time analysis of all integrated assets. Now, in 2019, they were awarded the most innovative startup by RSAC's Innovative Sandbox, SC Magazine's Cybersecurity Rookie of the Year, and got a spot on CNBC's Upstart 100 list. See why leading organizations like the New York Times, AB InBev, Schneider Electric, and many more trust Axonius to solve asset management for cybersecurity. To try it yourself, visit axonius.com/enterprise. That's AXONIUS.com/enterprise. And we thank Axonius for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we're talking with Bobby Calderwood. He has a fascinating backstory that leads into the current implementation, the current systems that they're working on, event-driven modeling. I do want to bring my co-host back in because this is a really, really interesting topic. Curtis, I want to throw it to you first.
Well, one of the things, of course, that I'm interested in is the implications of this kind of modeling in security for these processes. Does dealing with the events and with just these deltas in the events make the process perhaps inherently a bit more secure than processes that might see large blocks of data for full transactions sent back and forth at all times?
Yeah, so the methodology that we use to design event-driven systems that is basically, made real, the design methodology behind ONote is called event modeling. And I can't take credit for event modeling. That was the creation of Adam Dimitruk. He's the CEO of AdaptTech Group up in Vancouver. And he worked with Greg Young, who's kind of the father of CQRS and event sourcing, kind of coined those terms within the DDD community. They worked together to build out kind of this visual language for designing and describing event-driven systems. And the great security benefit to that is that you have a language where you can visualize the data flows. You see exactly how the state of the system is changing over time because you're modeling the system in these little slices, and you see all of the data flows, right? Okay, the data starts on this screen that's showed to this category of users, and then it's sent to this web service process as a command, and that web service, thinks about it and processes it and does whatever, and then it records just this business event, and that's in Kafka or in Event Store DB or whatever, and then we aggregate that event plus 5 or 6 other events up into this read model or this kind of materialized view, so you can see it. So it becomes really easy from an InfoSec perspective to visualize like where the information is flowing and who has access to it and what physical media it's stored on, et cetera. So that's one sort of security benefit of that. The one that you mentioned as well, having access in real time to a single business event, a single transaction, rather than sort of dealing in blocks of transactions. Yeah, we saw that in the payment space, right? When you're dealing with fraud in a batch, if you've got a bad transaction in the batch, you don't learn about it for hours or days after the fact, right? Like the money could already move because it's hidden in this haystack of 1,000 other transactions, and you don't find out about it until the bank on the other side complains or something. So it becomes really, you get this real-time aspect when you're dealing with one payment at a time. You can run that payment through your fraud detection algorithm and say like, this doesn't look right. We're going to reject this payment now, rather than waiting 3 days from now and having to ask the bank for money and mea culpa and send us the money back, please. We had a fraud incident and all that stuff. So yes, from a real time is sort of fundamentally better than batch for that kind of thing. The other thing you get is the ability to like train these models. So we saw this a lot at Capital One with credit models and fraud models and risk models. Because you have this sort of infinite sequence of events, you can sort of envision it as this infinite stream of events. You can take the first, chunk of events that you've already seen, train your machine learning model or whatever for fraud, and then each subsequent event you can tune that model and make it sort of marginally better. So there's sort of a lot of benefits there from a fraud and security perspective that you can get by going to this kind of real-time model.
Well, when you're talking about the fraud, you're looking at what the users have access to and what the users can do. Is that something where this model is perhaps more intrinsically fraud resistant than some of the other models that we've seen?
Yes, certainly I think that is the case because you are dealing with one capability at a time, right? One incident at a time rather than dealing with them in bulk. Exactly. Yep. And then even within the event model, so event modeling, like I said, is sort of this visual language. There's sort of 4 components to the event model. There's interfaces, user interfaces like the user would see, or they could be API endpoints if that's your primary interface into your product. There's commands, which is how you empower the user to change the system. So those are writes, those are inputs to the system. There are events, which are facts in the system, right? These are the business events that we're writing down. And then there are read models, which represent queries or materialized views, little databases of state that we aggregate up and derive from the events that we can then show to the user. So sort of 2 things help. The single piece flow, like you're describing about, I think helps reduce fraud and security incidents as you described. But the other aspect of it is just visualizing the writes from the reads separately, kind of the CQRS aspect of event modeling. You look at changes to your system only by way of commands, and you look at views into your system. So we separately empower our users with commands and inform our users with these read models. And just looking at that, it has a lot of security benefits as well, because there's only a handful of places where the user is allowed to introduce change or make writes to the system. So you can do more things around that. You can provide more fidelity around authentication and so forth of those changes, because those have repercussions downstream, whereas reads are relatively safer. Certainly you don't want to expose data that a particular user is not supposed to see, but reading data is a fundamentally different thing than writing data to change the state of the system from a security and fraud perspective.
Actually, Bobby, I'd like to just take a quick step back. We have a very wide variety of viewers, and I'd like you to step back and let's start talking about just what the heck is event modeling. And is it only financial, or is it can be used for other things?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I dove right into the deep end, Brian. I'm digging into like the security implications already here. So event modeling is just a visual modeling language. It's similar in some respects to event storming and kind of comes from that same tradition in the domain-driven design community. And really, it's just a blueprint for your system. How do we think about and envision an information system? And it's for any category of information systems, right? It could be across any industry vertical. It's certainly not just financial. I think some of Greg Young's early work in CQRS and event sourcing started in the financial world, but really this is applicable to any business domain, right? And you can really take even existing legacy information systems and sort of re-envision them in terms of, okay, we've got interfaces where we're, interacting with our users. That's kind of the user's touch point for interacting with our system. We've got commands or changes that we're allowing them to make to the system. We have events or things that happen in the system that we write down just so we understand what's going on. And then we show the user, the state of the world at some point. So we need read models. We need to derive these read models from these events. It's a little bit different way of thinking about information systems. We're used to the first concern in most design processes is like, all right, let's write down the ERD. Let's think about what our tables are and our entities and their relationships to each other and so forth. That's still there in event modeling, but it's later. That's kind of on the read model side of things. In event modeling, you could really take any information system, even a non-software information system, like something with files and paper and whatever, and you're just taking that business process and describing it in terms of these four kind of really simple constructs: interfaces, commands, events, and read models. And there's rules around it, and there's structure around how you can build this event model. Just a moment ago, you flashed a graphic of our homepage, which has a little video of a read model in ONote on the screen, and it's really a very simple sort of process for designing out this blueprint of an information system and seeing what the user can do, seeing how the information flows through the system, and then you show that information again out to the user so that you're informing them so that they're able to make the next decision, the subsequent step in the business process.
Great. Yeah, I think this is an interesting topic. One thing I wanted to get into, though, because we're running a little on time, as you talked a little about in the beginning of the new ONote product that you guys have and some of the systems you're building with that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So event modeling, again, this is created by Adam Dimitrick. Great invention. It's been really helpful to us in our business, both for our professional services work and on our own products. We found that, it was one of these sort of agile design processes where you are standing in a conference room with a bunch of other people and you're putting sticky notes up on butcher paper and connecting it with lines with Sharpie and all that stuff. And that's great. Kind of the analog in-person event modeling is great and it works. But boy, the artifact leaves a lot to be desired, right? After this 1 day or maybe a 2 day workshop, everyone's learned a ton. You've designed out this system sort of collaboratively in this workshop, and then you're left with a big piece of butcher paper covered in sticky notes. And like, what do you do with that, right? You can't move that to your team room. All the sticky notes fall off of it. And so you've got business analysts or whatever, like taking panoramic mobile shots with their phones, trying to capture and digitize this really great artifact, this blueprint of your information system. So it left a lot to be desired, especially in the age of COVID when you can't get in that conference room anymore with other people. Like, you've got to be sitting at home on your computers. We really saw a need to digitize this process, make it massively collaborative. So we do have a collaboration mode where you can be working with lots of other people on the same model. but we needed to digitize it. There's a couple of advantages to that, right? Not only does that make the design process better, but it also supports the system through implementation and into operations, right? When you're doing analog event modeling with just sticky notes and butcher paper, it's really just to support the design of the system. But if you have a digital artifact and you're building a data structure behind the scenes, this data structure describes your information system. So we can start to do things like code generation, where we're actually generating kind of a template application. It saves a lot of the sort of scaffolding work. We'll generate you some code so that you can just fill in the interesting bits, the business logic, and it saves you from having to wire up 1,000, web service endpoints and, how do we talk to Kafka or talk to Event Store DB or whatever. So we can do some code generation. We can also slice up the model into discrete tasks so that you can see, all right, here's the set of work that we have to do. We don't need a separate user generation or user story generation ritual where we sit in a room and figure out okay, how do we convert this diagram into user stories? You don't need to do that. You can mechanically derive the set of tasks that the dev team needs to do from this model. So we can do stuff to help implementation like code generation and project management breakdowns. Right. And then in operations, once you've got the system live, we can start to overlay operational metrics and data on top of this blueprint. So if there is an IT incident or if there's a security vulnerability or something that happens and you're on the incident call, all of that context of how the system works is lifted out of the brains of your development team, right? It's not Brent, who you don't, from the Phoenix project, who you don't have on the incident call and he knows where all the bodies are buried or she knows where all the bodies are buried. And if that person's not on the call, we're not going to get anything done. Now all that context is sort of lifted out of their heads and it's in this easy to consume sort of graphical format that's not just for developers. This design language was designed for developers, but also for non-technical stakeholders or for operations personnel or for UI UX developers or project managers or whatever. So you've got this sort of common lingua franca that you can use to understand your system, certainly during system design and implementation, but also during operations when something bad happens or when the InfoSec team needs to come in and audit your system. You've got this really nice artifact that allows you to do that. And then we can actually, we're experimenting with this now. This is a future feature we don't have yet, as is code generation. But overlaying operational metrics and monitoring on top of this blueprint so you can see, here's how many of these events we're getting per second, or the web service endpoint that serves this command is down, so we're write unavailable for this particular slice of functionality. We're still read available, but we're write unavailable for this particular thing. So you can start to see and visualize your system in a much more sort of poignant way to help during operation. So we really want ONote and event modeling by way of ONote to be useful during system design, system implementation, and operations.
Right. Really, really, really cool stuff. I wish we had some more time to talk about it. Unfortunately, all good things have to come to an end. Bobby, thank you so much for being here. We're running just a little bit low on time. I do want to give you a chance to maybe tell the folks at home where they can learn more about Evident Systems and ONote and all that great stuff.
Yep. So ONote.com. Check us out there. We do have a free tier, so you can sign up today and use ONote for free and begin your event modeling journey there. We've got a great community of users, so you can start to collaborate with some other folks. There's an event modeling Slack that Adam and his team runs. So if you want to check out event modeling, go to the event modeling Slack, and eventmodeling.org is Adam's website, kind of about event modeling, where you can learn more about that. You can also follow us on Twitter, ONote_SW. But really do check us out at ONote.com. That's probably the best place to get started.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being here. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another of the best enterprise podcasts in the universe. So tune your podcatchers to TWiT. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible. It's a team effort, and we have the best team on the market. Definitely my co-host, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, what's going on for you in this coming week, and where can people find you?
Well, I'm going to be doing what I do now. I'm going to be researching and beginning to write reports. I do have a piece that I'm working on for dark reading, where I will still be appearing. It's just that most of my work will now be at the Omdia tab on dark reading rather than the Edge tab. So watch for me there, and do follow me on Twitter at KG4GWA, where I will continue to post information about the things that I'm researching and writing. Got lots of new and exciting things coming up, and I'm looking forward to telling everyone who listens to TWiT about them in the coming year.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much again, Curtis. Congratulations again on your new gig. We also have to thank Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you?
Oh, my best bet is my Twitter handle. I'm ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. Or you're more than welcome to drop me an email. I'm Cheebert, CheeBert, at twit.tv. But better yet, why don't you use TWiT at twit.tv, and that'll hit all the hosts. Empty house, getting ready to put on the market. But, we've been getting all these really interesting real estate notices from our realtor in Florida. And, gee, there's a bunch of really interesting housing developments going up. So maybe, just maybe, we'll actually build a house from scratch with a developer and be able to go and customize it. Maybe add some fiber in and, whatever. It's not Cat 6, Cat 8, whatever's, doing. And looking forward to having a new studio in Florida and being in the same city as my partner in crime, Curtis Franklin.
Looking forward to it as well. Well, Happy New Year again, you guys. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible. And, obviously that's you as well. You're the loyal listener. You come and watch each and every week, listen to get your enterprise and IT new goodness. And we want to make it easy for you to catch up on your IT Pro news and your enterprise news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There you'll find all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, co-host information, guest information, and of course, the links of the stories we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos of your choice there, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version of your choice, your video version of your choice, and listen on any one of your devices and use any one of your podcatcher applications too, because we're on all of them. Definitely subscribe. That's the best way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT news, and it's really the best way to support the show as well. Now, after you subscribe, you can impress your friends, your family members, and your coworkers with the gift of TWiT, because we talk about a ton of fun topics here on the show, and I can guarantee they will find them interesting as well. Of course, you can always reach out to us at twit.tv if you want a different topic on the show. Definitely tell us something that's interesting to you as well. If you already subscribed, we do this show live each and every week at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays. That's at live.twit.tv. There you can come see how the pizza's made, the behind the scenes, all the fun stuff, all the banter that we have here on Twit. And of course, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the chat room live. We have a great set of characters in the chat room. That's at irc.twit.tv. And we have some great characters. They take us in great places, give us feedback, and give us questions during the show. So definitely join the fun in there as well. Now, if you can watch the show live but still want to be part of the amazing, you actually can't watch the show live, and you want to still be part of the amazing discussion and of course the community, we have a great website out there, twit.community. It's a 24/7 discussion board where tons of people are out there. The hosts are out there. There's tons of content and technology discussions. So definitely check it out and be part of the discussion 24/7. Plus, folks, it's also January. It's time for the TWiT audience survey. Ooh, it's an annual survey. It helps us understand our audience so we make your listening experience even better. It's completely anonymous, and it'll only take about 5 minutes. So go to twit.tv/survey21. That's twit.tv/survey21 to take it. Thank you so much for your support. Now, remember, you can always follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. I'm continuing to try to get my follower base up there. And you can see that I post my latest and greatest enterprise tidbits and, of course, all my rants and raves about the different companies out there. And, of course, I also post what I do at Microsoft, of course. And you can check that out at developers.microsoft.com/office. See all the latest and greatest ways to customize your office experience to make it more productive for you and your organization. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week. We couldn't do the show without them, so thank you so much for their support. Of course, thank you to all the engineers and staff at TWiT as well. And of course, I want to thank Mr. Brian Chee one more time. He's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer. He does all the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we really couldn't do it without him. So thank you again, Cheebert, for all your support. Of course, I want to thank, before we sign out, our editor behind the scenes, Mr. Victor, and of course, our TD for today, Mr. Ant Pruitt. Ant, there's nothing you can do. You are even getting the new TriCaster up and running over there. What's coming up for you in the coming weeks in the new year?
Well, right now, I'm just going to try to catch my breath because that was a lot of information on this episode of TWiT, man. Good Lord.
It really was.
But thank you, brother.
Thank you, sir. Happy New Year. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep TWiT.